joyful day at the PGA show. We're back here for our presentations. We have with us today David Angelotti. He's coaching out of Sea Island, Georgia. Very nice performance center there, incorporating same green stage as well, and PuttView. So he'll talk a little bit to us, maybe about his work with Phil Kenyon, what he feels like, and most of all about how he uses PuttView every day for his coaching.
Okay, so at Sea Island what we have is PuttView, Zen Green Stage, gas systems, and SAM Putt Lab and CapDo. So what we typically do in a lesson is we will set up a flat putt initially, test about 10 straight putts. Then what we'll do is we'll transition into a right to left and left to right putt. I know what the slope is on those putts, and so I know where the player would have to aim relative to the hole. What we do is then we have a aiming board from Vizio that extends across the entire platform that's in the degrees of air from the center of the cup. What we'll do is we'll have PuttView out and we will Which hole is this?
3.
Okay, add a ball.
Projections coming from the wall there. This can work in 8-foot heights. Cost is about $20,000. All tracker is about $1,500 a year for the license.
So the corridor that you can see here, right, is based off of speed. So we have that degrees of air board. We'll test on a right to left, left to right, and see if the player's aim and start line is relative to that line. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll evaluate a player's visual, how they see a line. Do they see nonlinear or linearly, as Mike Shannon would put it? And then from there, what we would do is give them strategies for better green rating. But what typically happens for your players that come into a studio or come and do green reading with you, they will typically look at a putt and they will try and predict the actual curvature of that putt. When they're doing that, they're looking for a few points. They're looking for like the apex and or kind of where that last third would be of the putt. So what I've done here is I've set up a I've set up two putts from pretty much identical locations, and what you can see is this outside line would be the actual aim line to make it in the center hole, right? So the actual line for the hole is the imaginary balls rolling on the surface, and what I have is a second hole that's underneath that where it's the exact same speed where that ball is going to go the same distance, yet the aim is at the apex. And look how when the player aims at the apex, hits a perfect putt, you can see how that ball would then miss low relative to that situation right there. So what happens a lot is people aim at the apex and then they extend a hole high reference out to right here. And that's where you get basically people coming in and saying, okay, it's ball out. It's 2 balls out. It's cup out. Where in reality, depending on the speed of the green, of course, and the angle that they're coming into from the slope, in reality it's more like foot, 2 foot, 3 feet, right? And everyone drastically underreads putts because of that targeting preference and targeting system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight a little bit of different ways that you can use PuttView relative to those different targetings. So we're going to look at this one over here. Calm that down. Here. Can we get rid of... There we go. Perfect. So what will typically happen is I'll ask a player to read the green, and they might do a number of different things. They might say, okay, I'm going to do aim point. They go to their traditional aim point and they try to predict a hole high reference. They might walk around the surface, try to feel the surface, walk around the green, try to predict where the ball is going to be relative to that. And then most of the time, they'll try to assign some kind of aim or reference to that. It might be start line, it might be the curvature of the putt, it might be the hole high reference. So understanding those different references allows us to really highlight what they need to look at and what they need to target throughout their stroke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the ideal line first. And you can see, like, it's not hard to move this to wherever you need to get the desired outcome that you want to see. So I'm going to get rid of the... Alright, so you can see here that I changed the width and it's nice and thin now. So the entire line like this would be what people are typically trying to see. They're trying to see how that ball will roll on that surface, right? And predict kind of where it's going to be relative to that. So a person that walks around the green, right, that is trying to predict how that ball is going to break on that surface, we might use the ideal line like this. Now, the thing with that is that some players need to look at the later part of that curve. So try and predict the last 3 feet, so last third of that putt. Some people want to predict the apex, so the highest point of that curve. And then some people want to see the very first part and start that ball on that line. So right now, we've broken down just one aspect and transition a player's eyes from just the start line, apex, kind of 1/3 back, and all the way into an entry point in the hole. So there's 4 different ways that you can ask your player to look to see how that affects their aim and start line from that. Then one of the things that I like to talk about is what's called drop point. Do you have a different name for it? 1/3 back, the double distance? Okay. So a player might come to the studio and they might say, all right, I want the ball to enter right here at 5 o'clock. And I think that ball is going to be approximately here on the 1/3 back. So what I would do is I would just say, okay, well, here's all possibilities for that putt. So this player would nail that really good. And then from there, what I would ask them to do is to just visualize a straight line from the ball to the center of the hole. So I asked Christoph to add this straight line in, and we call this the baseline. So that's just an imaginary line. I'm so used to standing on the other side. There we go. That's just the imaginary line from straight. Now, if you take the distance from the imaginary line to your prediction point, and then approximately double that out, what you're going to see is that would be about where the aim needs to be. So if the player can accurately tell you kind of how that ball is going to roll on that surface, where it's going to start, where it's going to be, how it's going to enter, then you can ask them to predict this 1/3 point back or 2/3 point to the ball and get a kind of feeling of where that aim would have to be relative to that. And then what you can show them is you can show this line going all the way out here, and it's much higher than that they would normally predict from there. So that works on any planar surface. So what that means is as long as the surface is tilted in the same direction, like this, across the entire, it can be slightly uphill, it can be slightly downhill, and it's going to be close, but as long as the surface is planar, where it's flat across, the same break percentage across, this double distance will work out. It doesn't matter if it's stimp, so the faster the green, it still works out. If it's slow, still works out. And so what typically happens is this just gives a good reference for setting up drills, and it allows players to still add a layer into their concepts in green reading.
Alright, guys, my stabilizer is dying off here. For more information, you can always visit us at
Next thing that I might do, let's say a
www.Par2pro.com.
player